So my practicum-based case was to participate in a research project regarding Aboriginal fathers who had involvement with child welfare or the justice system. The research was conducted by Dr. Jean Lafrance from the University of Calgary. The terms child welfare involvement has several meanings. For the majority of the men, it meant that not only did they grow up without fathers, many were raised in foster care, group homes, or on the streets, but their fathers had also been raised in residential schools. Child welfare involvement could also mean that their children were apprehended and placed in care. The painting on the right there was a depiction of a photo of Darlene Gates' grandfather. She says, "My grandfather died before I had the opportunity to know him. I heard he had a really rough life and died a broken man on the streets of Vancouver." We found our participants amongst the homeless in downtown Edmonton. We asked, what types of housing and supports are required to establish safe, stable, and long-term housing for the retention and return of their children and grandchildren? The appreciative inquiry approach was used to conduct the research. Appreciative inquiry makes use of storytelling as a key method of data collection. This is in line with Aboriginal oral tradition. Sharing circles were utilized for the majority of the participants. This quote from one of our Aboriginal dads clarified what it means to be discriminated against. Have you ever had to worry when your doorbell rings? Do you live in fear that someone could simply walk in your home and take your children away? Although it is obvious that all children have a father, when it comes to child welfare involvement, fathers are ignored, labeled as irrelevant or invisible. The results of the literature review highlighted the lack of education for social workers throughout Canada's universities regarding fathers. There was only one text that specifically mentioned fathers, according to Strega in 2008. Ball in 2009 states that although Aboriginal children are overrepresented in child welfare, the Aboriginal fathers are seriously underrepresented in child welfare interventions. This reinforces the necessity for policy reform, program changes, and a commitment to long-term investments to eliminate structural racism, institutional racism, discriminatory social barriers, and the need to provide assistance in overcoming the results of colonial decisions and actions. As we see in the diagram, having positive father involvement is beneficial in many areas. Why should we care about changing policies and providing programs that enhances father-child involvement? Like residential schools, the causes and effects of father involvement influences the current generation and generations to come. Even when we take factors such as incarceration into consideration, children still demonstrate the effects of positive father involvement. Furthermore, for those fathers who are incarcerated, being involved with their children reduced the rates of recidivism, and the fathers used what they learned in being incarcerated to educate their children to pursue positive paths. Many of our research participants spoke of being treated disrespectfully and being labeled. Involvement with Children's Services provides programs and supports for the mothers. We could not find a single program or support available to the dads. Even underemployed or unemployed fathers provide nurturance and presence to their children. In revisions of social work education, it is critical that the two-white parent model of a middle-class heterosexual family not be held up as being the norm. The kinship and extended care that is common amongst Aboriginal peoples, the multiple mother families that are common in African Canadian communities, and gay and lesbian families are equally important and legitimate. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I leave you with another quote from one of our fathers. As a colonist, I take for granted my freedoms, including the right to care for my children without fear. I heard that because of the low birth weight amongst Canadian Caucasians, the influx of immigrants, and the high birth rates amongst Aboriginal peoples, that we colonists are now in the minority, although we still hold the majority positions of power. When Nelson Mandela was elected, he treated his oppressors with forgiveness, although he certainly would have been justified in doing otherwise. We colonists may want to consider what our future is going to look like and act accordingly. Oh, yeah, I'm going to walk with this thing.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Kathy has a question.
Go. Thank you, Sharon, so much. That was very powerful. What a way to start the afternoon, huh? I guess my question for you is, and first off, I should say hi to Jean LaFrance for me.
Okay,
And as fellow social workers, I was really interested to hear your framing around social work and social work practice. What about health and community services? What implications are there at the service level?
That's not something that we looked at. We were looking at basically from a child welfare perspective, which of course fits into the social work practice, and that was our focus, was the impact with child welfare involvement.
Okay, can you just extrapolate a little bit? Because I think the implications are clear and similar. What does it mean for services, for child welfare services or any kind of community services?
Well, we did have a meeting with stakeholders and major actors in terms of the government and child welfare, and we are looking at doing multicultural events and outreaches. And actually, when I was at the group, they were talking about training for people in terms of how to deal with other cultures. I used the term cultural safety, and they all looked at me with blank faces. None of them had ever heard of the term. So I brought up Yuvik's course of cultural safety and what I had learned. And so I've been delegated the opportunity to put together cultural safety training for these various leaders and their organizations. Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Good job, Sharon.